Hello, everyone, and welcome to our the Association's Art History Festival. My name is Greg Perry. I'm the CEO of the association. I think we're now in day 5 of our Art History Festival, which is taking place all across the UK with over 50 organizations and individuals participating and presenting some 70 events through this week. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for being flexible. I also thank, of course, our 2 speakers today. As you probably all know, this was actually going to be the kickoff event for our festival on Monday morning, but because of the Queen's untimely passing and funeral, we rescheduled it to today, and we're very grateful that Leslie, Primo, and Rita Keegan were available to do so. So again, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and then they'll come on and have a conversation for about 40-45 minutes. Then I'll come back on after that time and pose any of your questions. So if you do have questions, do put them in the Q&A in the Zoom, and we'll get to those. So first, Rita Keegan is a New York City native who's lived in London since 1980. Alongside contemporaries Keith Piper and Gary Stewart, Rita Keegan's practice is a defining example of the ways in which new media experimentation intersect with the British Black arts movement. In the aftermath of the 1981 Brixton Uprising, Rita helped establish the Brixton Art Gallery, curating Mirror Reflecting Darkly, the first exhibition by the Black Women Artists Collective in 1982. She was co-founder in 1984 of Copy Art, a resource and education space for community groups and artists working with the emerging technologies of computers, scanners, and photocopiers. And shortly after that, at the Women's Artists Slide Library, she established the Women Artists of Color Index. In the early 1990s, she was the director of the African and Asian Visual Arts Archive. Along her artistic and archival practice, Rita has also taught new media and digital diversity at Goldsmiths, where she helped establish the digital media undergraduate. Rita's work has appeared in exhibitions, among others, such as Let the Canvas Come to Life with Dark Faces at the Blue Coat Gallery in 1990, Transforming the Crown, African, Asian, and Caribbean Artists in Britain, 1966 to 1996 at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and Transformations at the Lewisham Art House and the Horniman Museum in 2006, most recently in a solo exhibition somewhere between there and here at the South London Gallery in 2021. Rita will be in conversation today with Leslie Primo, who is a lecturer, writer, and broadcaster. He's a graduate with a degree in art history and an MA in Renaissance Studies from Birkbeck University College London. He formerly worked at the National Gallery London for 18 years and has worked for the Art Society as an accredited lecturer since 2009. Leslie teaches at Imperial College London and the City Literary Institute, also in London. He appears regularly in documentaries for the BBC and Channel 4, including Michelangelo, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which aired in February of 2020 on BBC 4, and most recently, Turner, Light and Landscape. Mostly he presented Turner, Light and Landscape, which aired in January also on BBC and is still available on the iPlayer. Leslie is currently writing a book with the intriguing title, The Foreigners That Invented British Art, to be published by Thames and Hudson in 2023. So I will pass it on to Leslie and Rita, and I will come back later. Leslie, handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for that very generous introduction. And welcome everyone to this Art History Festival. And of course, I am in the home of Rita Keegan, who's sat here next to me in her home. And we are going to take a sort of a trip, as it were, down memory lane. So I'm going to share some images in a moment, and we'll get ourselves running with Rita's life. So let's begin today by introducing Rita, of course, and also we're going to start with some questions. But before we start with the questions, let's go to our first image that I have here. And I'm going to ask Rita a little bit about this image that we have here. What's going on here, Rita, in this image?
Well,
what's this about?
I like to say Rita Keegan, her Hollywood years. I'm standing in front of a painting I did when I was in college. So this I went to college in San Francisco Art Institute. This is a few years later and a few miles between, because I'm living in Hollywood at that time. And I had a very good friend who said he wanted to take some pictures. And so there you go. So this was my flat in Hollywood, the foot of the Hollywood Hills.
So
to the toes.
So, I mean, yeah. What year are we looking at here, Rita?
Well, this is sort of my late 70s album cover. Not that I can sing, but if I were to have an album cover, this would have been it at the time. Yeah.
And the artwork that you've got there behind you is quite an extraordinary artwork. Is that actually on the wall of your apartment, or is this a massive canvas?
It was a massive canvas. I mean, in the States, it was not an issue to paint big.
Mm-hmm.
I had to readjust my landscape when I came here, because first off, people don't have walls. I mean, they have walls, but they have chimney breasts.
We're just not as big here in the UK, are we, really?
Well, yeah, it's big, but you just don't, you don't have the wall space. And so when you are dealing with houses with chimney breasts, I mean, I think basically places in America don't have chimney breasts. We have radiators.
Oh, right.
You have to.
We're a bit old school.
You have to accommodate the radiators.
Yeah. And look, Rita, as we go through these images today and talk about your practice as an artist, I'm keen to know whether you even name any of these works. I mean, do these works have names? Well, do you give them names? I mean,
sometimes, not necessarily. I mean, some names come to you, but these were sort of really, they were essences of my women friends when I was living in San Francisco. And I can name names, but it's probably best that I don't.
Don't name names. Right. And
but this is the 70s in San Francisco, so that's
And do you sign works? Is that a thing for you, Rita?
Yeah, I always figured I'd sign it when I sell it. So there's a lot of work that isn't signed.
Right, that's an interesting take. It's an interesting take. Now, look, I'm going to ask just a question. Would you say that your work is rooted in some kind of tradition? I don't know, be it family, nationalistic, or art historical?
Well, I grew up in New York, and I spent a lot of time in museums and galleries, and also I was more than aware of the Harlem Renaissance, and I guess being a strongly visual person, sitting there and watching, Hollywood movies with Bojangles Robinson and Lena Horne, and seeing, and also because of the family photographs that were around, there were lots of people that were reminiscent of those things from the 40s.
We're going to look at some of those family photographs at some point as well. And, I'm interested in what you're saying is that the tradition that your work is rooted in is a Hollywood tradition.
No, I think it's rooted in Western art, because you can't spend a lot of your childhood wandering through the Metropolitan. And at the high school I went to, our student cards got us into the Museum of Modern Art for free. And, so I had the whole museum and gallery sector of New York at my fingertips. So I can't separate my art learning. When I started I had art classes at a very young age, and then I went to an art high school, so I cannot separate
It's all intertwined.
Yeah.
Intertwined. And when you say your art is, of course, rooted in a tradition of Western art, do you think art is free of any colonial legacy?
No, none of us are free from colonial legacy. I mean, it doesn't matter what race, what gender, where you are in the world. The world that we live in is so, you cannot separate it. You can't separate it from your groceries. You can't separate it from your clothing. You can't separate it from cultural ideology. And imperialism affects all of us.
And is that therefore embedded in your work?
There's no way I could separate myself from it. You know, I am African American. My mother was born in the Caribbean. My father was from Canada, and his people went through the Underground Railroad up to Canada. And there's no way I could. Historical events affected who and what I am, and I could not have existed without that. You know, in my show, Trophies of Empire, when one was looking at the 500th anniversary of Columbus, that intervention, I used myself as the starting point because I could not have existed without that historical intervention.
Good point to make, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm assuming then that you've addressed this in your work, this colonial legacy.
I don't think one ever stops addressing it. It's you know, even if it's not at the front of my my work, you do your work, and sometimes you have to stand back from it to see. Yeah. As Frida Kahlo says, what the water gave you. Yeah. So
historical distance.
And even if you don't know you're doing it, your work is things come up.
Indeed, as we art historians always say, art is a mirror of society, and it's a reflection of where we are at that time. And sometimes, of course, work is timeless because some things are never resolved, are they? Such as the colonial legacy. But I want to bring you to this image, though, Rita. I mean, this is quite an extraordinary. What's going on here? You're in a picture frame.
I'm putting myself in the picture, literally.
You're literally putting yourself in the picture.
The photograph was done by an amazing photographer, Rotimi Fenner-Kuwaiti. We were really good friends. He was involved in the Brixton Art Gallery. And I think I was feeling pressure of feminism, hence the ruffles and the wigs, and I think we were getting near Halloween, and in America Halloween's a big thing, but I found out here that it wasn't.
No.
I just, I felt that I wanted to look at history and look at putting myself in a historical pose. Within historical costuming and
within the frame.
Yeah, within the frame,
of historical. I mean, it's like an old master frame, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
And so you're putting yourself, as you say, literally in the picture.
Yeah, and you see historical drawings of the colonies and the where you have people of color and they exist. Also, I felt it was really important to acknowledge the fact that we have always existed. We didn't just sort of arrive with slavery and come from nowhere.
There was a history.
There is history, and we wore what people wore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an extraordinary image, and it really is about art mirroring life, literally. And this reminds me, in fact, of a self-portrait by a Spanish artist called Bartolomeo Esteban Murillo. It's in the National Gallery, and he's actually in a frame, and he's coming out of the frame in much the same way. But here, this is almost turning this idea on its head and saying that we all belong in this art historical context, and we're all part of the canon.
Well, also, there is the whole surrealist thing of stepping out of the canvas, stepping as it's also dream state. It's owning the space, and one could say we are all framed in by our times, our culture, and I always hope my work can be seen on a surface level, and that's fine. But if you want to, you can go further and see more. But I also don't necessarily expect people to do that. It's only if they want to.
So you're allowing the audience to make their own interpretation. Perhaps.
Because as you do, and your interpretation of work changes from seeing a paintings, that I always loved, and then finding out more about it as I grew up. You know, because if I go back to the Metropolitan, the work, the hang, especially in the 50s and 60s, didn't tend to change.
Right.
And you would always be able to see your old friends in.
That's a good way of describing them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there were things that I lived with, that I knew that I could always go back to and sit in this room and look at this work.
Yeah. Let's have a look at a work here that is a particular favorite of mine. This work is that sort of idea that you were talking about. You can see the sunset from a surface point of view, but you can also go deeper. This is literally a layered work. Tell us a bit about how you came to this.
Well, I was working, well, I helped start an organization called Copy Art, and we would teach people how to produce posters. It was in the days in the late 80s, early 80s, so 84, you know, agitprop, fanzines, and you could get used to photocopies quite easy. But the place Copy Art allowed people to actually use the machines. Back in the day, you used to have to hand something over to the photocopy people.
The professional.
The professional that pressed the button.
Yeah.
And but in our place, we taught people that they could press their own buttons.
But presumably at the time, such machinery was really
it was
expensive.
Very rare. Yeah, and it was.
How did you manage to get hold of this machinery and allow people to actually?
I think the GLC, remember them? The organization had a GLC grant.
But if viewers out there who don't know, that's the Greater London Council, as it used to be called.
Yes, and also one of the people who was involved, he was a real good salesman. So he managed to talk Canon into, I mean, we paid our bills, but into renting the machine, and it was an amazing Canon copier that had this facility to change the toner.
Right.
You know, there wasn't a flick of a button. You had to actually physically remove the toner and put in. You can see the blue and the green and the black, and also with different color paper, you got different effects. And because having studied printmaking, I understood how all you needed were plates to actually create the work. So there's a black and white. There was a black and white one of me as a child, black and white one of me as an adult, and I could lay them on top.
Is that what we're looking at here at the top? That small image at the top of your head? Is that you as a child?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That's little me.
Yeah, and this picture of you here, is that captured at a moment? Someone's taken a picture of you at some sort of moment in time.
Yeah, people have always, I've been always around people that have taken pictures. We always took pictures when I was a kid. I come from a family that seemed to have liked their photographs taken. It certainly helps that they're really gorgeous people. But I don't know if that was actually their reason, but they were amazing. And I was left with a astounding photographic record of an African Canadian family from 1880 on up.
So what you've gone ahead and done then, Rita, is that you've used that archive in your work, and it's become your work in a way. And what people out there can't see when they look at this image that we're looking at now is that it's multiple layers.
And it's collage. So it's you know, Hannah Hawk made on the kitchen table. Also, what was good about photocopy is because I didn't have a studio, because I didn't have facilities, you had to find ways of working within those limitations. And with the photocopier, you didn't have to wait for your work to dry as you would with proper printmaking. You also didn't need large facilities. And you could just put it in an A3 or A4 folder and walk out the door. And when you needed to, you could do the work. And, you know, with a bit of a glue stick and a X-Acto knife, you could do your work.
As I've always said in my studies of art history, throughout the centuries of art history, artists have always utilized the latest technology to actually make their works. And of course, or from Leonardo to where we are now. The latest technology back in the old days, of course, of Renaissance art history was a new paintbrush or a new kind of pigment, etc. So what Rita's doing here is no different from what artists have done for centuries before, utilize the latest technology and bring it to their advantage, as we can see here. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Do you describe yourself as an international artist or a British artist?
Well, the word British is can be quite contentious. And I mean, I've lived here longer than I've lived in America, but you know, I guess I've always considered myself more based in the world, and more of I guess one of the many rootless people that traveled around. So there, you know, I'm part of a larger arts community,
Yeah.
and I'm not just talking about visual art, but I'm also talking about the community of the diaspora.
Mm.
So there's lots of places that I am a member of, but you know, I can say I'm a New Yorker, but I haven't lived in New York in 40 years, but you know,
Yeah.
I'm always a New Yorker.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what I want to show us now is this. Here is another image, and again, it's using the image that we just saw. In fact, both the images that we just saw are reusing this. And what I'm trying to show here is the layered effect, or the layered effects, or the sampling effects that Rita uses in her work. I mean, would that be a good way of describing?
Yeah, I mean, I use a palette of images as well as a palette of colors and a palette of paper. They're all and I guess it goes in with contemporary music and contemporary culture that I'm sampling. I'm sampling myself, and I'm sampling the shells are sort of the you get these images that are non copyright, and they're probably Victorian images of shells. So I'm using the different resources that are around.
So there's a historical sampling going on here, and of course that's the nature of sampling, isn't it? Really, because if you think about it in music, you historically sample something that's been done before, but then reinject.
I'm also sampling my past. I'm sampling. The thing is that as we get older and grow, we still take that child with us. You know, I kind of feel we just get older. We don't necessarily grow up.
Right. And you're literally taking different parts of your life here and sampling them together, taking, as you said, a child with you. I mean, do you feel that your work would be different if you were from working in another place other than Britain?
I don't think so. I mean, I care about the things, and the people I've met here have gone into a different kind of opportunities that I've had. London is an interesting city, as Lord Kitchener says. London is a place to be, but it's also, unlike New York. New York isn't the center of government. That's Washington, D.C. It isn't you do have art, visual culture, and a different kind of culture there, but also California has cinema and movies and things, and Washington has government, whereas London has it all. By the very nature of the city, you end up meeting different people from different practices, and the things that I did with the Arts Council, I don't think I would have had that advantage had I lived in the States.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, do you feel that that where you're from, do you feel that does it matter to you where you're from? Does it matter?
No, I think it's the luck or the lack of luck of birth.
Right.
I mean, it is my, my parents were, but my mother's from the Caribbean, my father was from Canada, so they were not, they were American in the sense of the Americas.
Yeah.
And my mother's father was from the Caribbean, but her mother was from South America. So there's more and more of the Americanness. So that informed me, but also they were children of the Commonwealth. So that informed, how I have my tea.
Yeah.
And how I live my life, and also how it was very easy for me to feel relatively comfortable here. But also being a foreigner in a foreign land, there's something liberating about it.
That's a good point,
there's some problems, but but also we can't forget the hierarchy of foreignness. And
there's a hierarchy of foreignness.
Yes, there is,
right.
And American is one of the highest in hierarchy of foreignness.
Okay, good point. Okay, so look, I mean, do you feel being in Britain fosters a sense of freedom when you're creating your work, or do you think it causes restrictions?
When I'm doing my work, I don't think about any. I don't worry about how it's going to be taken. I don't worry about how I'm going to show it. I'm just doing my work. And for me, there's swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
And the places that I met and the people that I did things with. The time also having come here, where there was sponsorship for the arts, where you had things like ILIA and GLC, other organizations that supported artists of color, supported women.
Yeah. ILIA, by the way, in the London Education Authority. They don't exist anymore either.
Yeah. And those institutions did support places to work. And that in turn supported artists to do lots of different types of things.
Do you think that same spirit of fostering the arts is still here with us in Britain today?
I think we do, in spite of, as opposed to because of.
Right. Okay. Yes. Good point to make. As you can see, I'm just sort of scrolling through some of these images now, where we can see how you layer things, and these continuous layering of images and continuous sampling and layering, and the colors as well, which are quite extraordinary. Who's the girl in this? Is this?
That's me again.
That's you again.
That's my kindergarten picture. And it's also when you collage, you rip up images and rip up faces. You can
literally see the tears.
And I felt really uncomfortable about collaging and ripping up images of people I didn't know. That is, one could go to a magazine and use stuff, but I guess with issues around feminism and colonialism and the appropriation of somebody else's image, I felt that I felt uncomfortable doing it. So whereas I can do it with my family because they're my family.
And you can appropriate your own image.
They're mine, whether I want them to be or not. So, and to rip my own face is I've given myself permission, and that's what it is about.
And you don't feel as strongly about ripping your own face, I mean, rather than a stranger?
I could rip it up and start again, but as the song goes. But no, because it's means to an end, and it's deconstructing. It's finding, I guess, that sort of internal investigation, and the ripping is layering. The ripping is finding a way through, and different ways of seeing.
Different ways of seeing. Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel that working as an artist in Britain, or being associated with Britain, has been helpful to your practice, or maybe a hindrance?
I think it's the people that I've met living in London, and the opportunities that I've had, I can't say that, hindsight is 20/20 vision. It's not necessarily easy, but then as an artist, I don't think anywhere is easy. And especially if you aren't privileged. I mean, I am more privileged than some, but I'm less privileged than others. But there are things that it's a lot about timing and place.
Yeah.
I would not have gotten involved in collective galleries in 1980 or 82 in America, because they're the idea of a collective gallery, they, even if there was, they wouldn't have used those terms.
Right.
You have to have an open Marxist ideology to talk about collectives.
Yeah, and it's interesting that even as recently as the last few years, the Turner Prize has decided to start awarding the Turner Prize to collectives. So those collectives are still not exactly seen to be the standard model, shall we say, for art practice.
But you still have to had to have an understanding of Marxism to even enter into a collective, and because of politics in America and the legacy of McCarthy using terms like collective, they weren't used. There would have been maybe workers association, wouldn't even call it workers association, you would call it association of artists. Or
would that be tantamount to saying that you're a communist if you're in America?
I think
am I overstepping the mark?
I think it could be labeled that. But you still have that left-right debate in both here and there, and so it depends on what suits, you know.
So I want to come back to this work here, because I've noticed in a lot of your work we see lots of, and they look like roses to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's again.
You've got a thing with roses?
I like roses. Yeah. I mean, but also I like seashells. I like, I guess the thing is that roses they're fragrant. Seashells, it's it's the water, and I also use leaves and stuff. So it's the elements. They're representing the elements. They're representing.
Where do these roses come from, though? I mean, is this a sample of a photograph, or?
No, they were again those Victorian etchings of samples of like Audubons and things like that. So
yeah,
they're I guess they're part of our collective psyche.
Right. Because you can see how we come to this image here. Here they are again. In this image, and the person at the center of the image.
That's me again.
That's you again.
Who else? And there's a little one in the background. There's me and my mother hiding. And then on the other one, there's the seashells and African fabric. So it is textures and colors, and it's the same. The flowers may be the same, but they change by the nature of what they're printed on, and
that's quite deliberate then, to change the color.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably have used the photocopier and got various different colors of paper, because these are all collaged images.
Yeah.
And then run different color paper through green toner.
Yeah.
So you have your yellow, your different shades of green and white, and then the green toner, and then I would do it with the brown or black. And so with a limited palette of image and a limited palette of colors, it would end up building up to quite a lot of different things.
Why were they limited, Rita?
Because the canon only did, but we're talking now, color copies. You couldn't get color copiers. There was no way you're going to have access to a color copier.
Yeah, you're probably aware of that Orson Welles quote, aren't you, really? The one that says that the absence of limitations is the enemy of art.
Well, yeah, it's easy for him to say. We found some limitations, and I think one has to be creative. I mean, it's the nature of creativity to look at sampling, look at the music where you weren't given music education, but it didn't stop you from getting a turntable.
Yeah, and education yourself.
Yeah, and making some beats.
Yeah.
So it's just because, but on the other side of it, what somebody could do if they were actually given materials.
Yeah.
So if you can do, and that was always a whole discussion about funding of the arts, as though they do so well without any money. But imagine what they could do with some money.
Yeah.
So that was,
So you're not a subscriber to the Orson Welles quote, and you don't want the limitations. You'd like to have.
I'd like to have choice.
Yeah.
Choices, and it's easy for it's easy for someone that comes up with issues of privilege, that have grown up with privilege.
Yeah.
To be able to say that.
Indeed. So that leads me to my next question. What is it about Britain that makes you want to continue to be here despite Brexit? I mean, has that had any effect on your work? I mean,
well,
it's difficult to have choices.
It just depends on which flavor hell you want to live in. When I first came here, it was sort of like a choice between
Freudian slip there.
There you go,
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher. I mean, there was
hard choice.
It was a hard choice. I mean, and there's a little glitch with Obama, but for the most part, it's been the same thing. It's much of a muchness.
Yeah.
And being, I guess, an old hippie, I believe that people, if everybody did their own, everybody did a little, then the world would be a better place. But that doesn't.
Not enough people are doing a little.
No.
Right. So look, that you spoke earlier about family and not wanting to dismember images of people you didn't know. So I've noticed here, this work again. Here you are again as a young girl, and then you've collaged into the background. Clearly, this photograph that we can see over here on our right.
Well, I own them. They're mom and dad.
That's your mom.
Well,
and dad.
actually, they own me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I am theirs.
Yeah.
And also because the photographs were so old, quite a lot of times I was working with these young people who had no idea what their future was going to hold for them. So I guess for me, I was looking at these people just really fresh and young and with a different world. Also when I did work at the British Museum, and I was looking at the Egyptian antiquities, there was one particular statue that looked like my mother and father. And quite often, the man even had a little nasty mustache, the little tiny 40s, 30s mustache. But I found that in a lot of the photographs, there was the same pairing, the paired statues, they call them, and it's the man and the woman. And, and the women were generally sort of a yellow ochre color, like my mother, and the men were sort of brown, burnt sienna. And so I kept on seeing these pairings, and then in the family photographs, there'll be ones of my grandmother and my grandfather, and then my great grandmother and my great grandfather. And these couple images kept on appearing.
Yeah. So look, were your parents, alive at the time you did?
No. So I guess there is a homage, there's a remembrance, and also, there's.
How did you feel about dismembering a picture of your parents who are no longer with you?
That's they're not here in body, but they're who I am and my ideals and the world that I inhabit. They have given me the you know, good or ill, they've given me the blocks to deal with it. And that's a painting that I did for my father, almost it was, I think it was a passport picture. And that's a family photo of my mother, my father, and my brother and me. And I'm the piece of fabric that my mother is holding, which, which I find quite amusing, as much as I like my pieces of fabric.
Now, look, Rita, I'm conscious that we're coming to our close in a moment, but just to have a look at a few more images here. This one's from the pages of the book here. Now, what can you tell us about the process and the people?
Okay, well, these are my father's people who were in Canada, and the woman's, it's 4 generations. It's the woman sitting down in the fur wrap is my great-great-grandmother, and then Mary, and then the little child in the corner is my uncle Lauren. The taller woman is my great-grandmother, that's Chastina. And the other one is my grandmother, Rita. So it's 4 generations.
Right. So we're kind of almost looking through the ages, through your family.
Mary was the daughter of a black woman, a black man and a white woman, a daughter. Her father was a slave, but because she was the daughter of a white woman, she couldn't be held in slavery, and so was sent up to Canada.
Right. So we're looking at
1830. Yeah.
Yeah, 1830. That's I mean, you know, these images, you know, again, family seem to be a really important element.
Maybe it is because I am on my own, but you know, my family. I also have this amazing record of family, and as a person of color, all you end up seeing yourself represented in historical things, or working in the field, or being somebody's servant. And you know, life was bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I use my family as our family, as world family.
But it is quite unusual though, isn't it, Rita, to have so much documentary evidence of your family going back so many generations? I
thought that I was lucky because I was Black having that, but then I realized that I'm lucky in general, because a lot of people don't have that. I think there was a piano stool that collected lots of photos. Right,
I see. So look, as we're coming to a close here, we're almost out of time. You've got an image clearly of your family here again.
And my mother, my father, and my aunt, and 2 other soldiers, and another woman.
Another woman.
Well, you know, it is, you know, double date, you know, but my mother it's a restaurant in New York, and my mother with the gardenia in her hair looking so fabulously 40s.
Oh, there on the far left. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. And you've paired it with this print here, this African print. Is it an African print?
Yeah, it's kente cloth. And so it is you know, it's trying to tie in with lineage, with symbolism, with colors and stuff.
Yeah, color. It's all about color for you, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I like black and white, but I have to put in a little color.
Yeah. So look, we are now at our 45-minute mark here. So I'm going to just quickly show us a few more images.
That's Chastina and Charles, my great-grandmother.
Yeah.
Great. And that's my mother and my grandmother Rita and Olive. Right. So that's them.
That's them. Yeah. So look, I'm gonna allow Gregory to come back in now as we wrap up, and hopefully we'll have some questions. Thank you so much, Rita, for this. It's been an absolute honor.
It's been a pleasure. Slice of heaven on my side.
Thank you both. I was so shocked and saddened when you said, Lily, you're about to end, because I was just mesmerized and listening, engrossed in all the conversation. But we have a chance now for some questions that people want to ask of Rita. We have a couple already. One person's asked about just the combination of the flora with the seashells and sea life, and they even recognize the Venus cone in one of the earlier ones that you have, the blue image, vertically oriented. Can you talk about the juxtaposition of those things?
Well, I think it's the thing is that there is a longing and a nostalgia in terms of these and the eternalness of seashells, because they do seem like they're are forever, and then the fragileness of flowers, how they, I cannot separate myself from art history. Sorry, as much as I try, but the whole thing of the symbology of flowers, from the bud to the full blown, and then also the nature of shells. They were used as currency. If you're doing Western, it's Venus rising from the half shell, and in so many other cultures, they are both things, flora and fauna. There's so many things that in lots of different cultures. Now, I don't tend to use animals. There's more flora and less fauna in my work, but maybe that's also because I've lived in cities. And as a little girl, my mother had a box of seashells, so that she had given from the Caribbean. So there is that sort of a memory, and how you do go to the sea and you hold a shell up to your ear, and you're taken somewhere else. If you don't hear the sea, at least you can pretend you did.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a memento mori aspect of being seen, life and death, the
Yes.
fragility of the flowers, and the life that formerly inhabited the seashells, no longer there, and so on. There's really more questions that we've got, Gregory.
Yeah. Well, this is sort of an art historical question, not surprisingly, but what artists, Mark asks, what artists have you mostly looked at for inspiration?
I've always liked portraits or self-portraits. So I've always liked the look of, I could lie and say I didn't like Frida Kahlo, but of course I liked Frida Kahlo. And the college I went to had Diego Rivera murals. So many of the women artists. And in the early 80s, you had an influx of books about women artists. So to look at these giant portraits of these Victorian and 17th century, and also the Metropolitan has a huge 17th and 18th century collection. That and we're not even talking about the guys where Rembrandts and those portraits, those self-portraits. So self-portraitures have always, I found, quite fascinating.
So it's about the genre rather than an individual artist.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other Gregory?
Well, if I may, I wanted to ask a question, because you talked about, you born in the Bronx and grew up in New York City. And sometimes what I hear from students in London is they don't feel like some of the national institutions are really for them, even though they may not live very far away. And somehow it's a world away for them. When you were growing up in New York City, did you feel like those great institutions, the Met, MoMA, the Guggenheim, et cetera, were there for you? Were they very accessible to you?
They were mine. They were, all I needed was my bus pass. And and they were free. And I don't ever remember feeling unwelcome, wandering by myself through the Metropolitan or meeting friends. I mean, the only time I did cut school, we went to the Met, which is really almost embarrassing, or Central Park. So if you go to Central Park, then you walk, on one side, you have the Natural History, and on the other side, you have the Metropolitan or the Guggenheim, and I never felt unwelcome in any of those places. And I think I was quite a singular child, and so it's very easy to go to those places and be lost in thought and process.
Do you think, Rita, though, that this is because the class system that we have here in the UK is much more deep-seated and rigid than it is in America, because I think Gregory's absolutely right about kids here. I mean, I never met any kids when I worked at the National Gallery who came from Hackney, Brixton, etc.
I think it manifests itself very differently. I remember going to, I went to Russia a million years ago, and we're a group of, it was cultural exchange, but on the Saturday, we were at the Hermitage, and there were tons of people there, and there were sailors there, and people that just normal people. So there is I think in America, there is an ownership of the arts.
Yeah.
And you're not, and even if you're belligerent in the sense that this belongs to me, I can go there. I think that I don't know, I don't remember not being encouraged or being told that I couldn't. And if you're relatively well behaved and not going there with the spray can, then, and I think, well, I don't think they had quite gotten tagging to the extent that it is now. But yeah, I don't remember going anywhere and not feeling I could. Whereas there's more likely that I have experienced that in other places, in department stores in California, or maybe or places here. But I'm just so oblivious to thinking, to even giving somebody the credit that I don't belong there.
So this seems to me, Rita, it's part of your personality rather than there's no exclusion going on here. The title of this talk today, of course, is Exclusion and Inclusion, but you don't seem to have been excluded at all, do you?
Well, I probably have, and I just didn't pay any attention. There is that, but I think that the New York City school system at the time, I can't say now, but they you went to the museum and you went to ballets and operas, maybe not a lot, but they made an effort to do that. But I think that places like that were going at the time, Ilya would make sure that kids went to museums and galleries. There was funding for those things.
I was one of those kids.
And I think that funding for schools and children it's key. If you learn that you can make music, if you learn that you can have, how can you take art away from schools? You can teach everything by an art course. You can teach math, you can teach drama, you can teach history. It's so limited in the way they actually are allowed to, they don't use the resources that we all know that are there as artists and historians. Those are things that would make just such a difference.
Yeah, I've got a question that I'd like to ask you actually, and that was, do you consider yourself part of the British canon of art?
Well, I think I am part of an international canon of art, and I think that a lot of my work is part of the diaspora, and I think it is part of the English-speaking diaspora.
Because the reason why I've asked that, Rita, is because I hear, of course, on the grapevine that recently Tate Britain has actually acquired some of your work to be displayed in their permanent collection, and Tate Britain is the repository of British art.
I'm still trying to get my brain and spirit emotionally around that. I know what it would have meant to me to see myself represented on the wall, to see a Black woman that wasn't a slave or a maid or just a person. That would have, I wouldn't have even had to think that there was a reason why one was there. So I think the English term is chuffed. I'm really excited and I'm terrified and I'm trying to own it. So yeah, I am. Thanks, Leslie.
That's great.
Back to you, Gregory.
Well, you may have partially answered this question that Romy posed, which is where can we see more of your work?
Well, this one you won't be able to. There's a show coming up in October 23. So it's next year. They're doing a major show on feminist practice at the Tate, and the work will be part of that. So I won't see it till then either. But yeah, I mean, and at the moment, I'm doing bits and pieces. I'm going on a transatlantic cruise in the middle of October. Queen Mary 2. Yeah, I'm so weird and excited. And I will do libation as I cross the ocean. But you know, so I mean, at the moment, you know, as Jill Scott say, I'm living my life like it's golden. It's just I'm taking it all in and thankful to the ancestors, the gods, the friends, the enemies, and I'm just taking it all in, you know. It's taken a long time to say it's about damn time, but for a lot of us, and we need to see a wider variety of images on the walls. You know, we need to all be part of the world that we help create.
Back to you, Gregory.
Well, I think that's so well said, and probably a fitting place to end this. So I want to thank Leslie, Primo, and Rita Keegan for this really interesting conversation, and for giving us your time and sharing your story and your work with our audiences. We very much appreciate it, and thank you again.
Thank you all. Thank you all for
Thank you.
coming. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.